let's do that. Okay, so this call is being recorded, as we have to say at any point of time. CRM and Agentforce. So welcome, everyone. We are starting with CRM Analytics plus Agentforce, which is really awesome because we had seen Tableau come up with it. We hadn't seen CRM Analytics, which Santiago did, and Mark very happily shared with all of us on LinkedIn, and that's how I got introduced to Santiago, and the story goes from there.
Welcome to the party.
Welcome to the party, exactly. Next slide, please, Santiago.
Mm-hmm.
So we welcomed everyone. Icebreakers. Usually we do some icebreakers because some of us are old Goldilocks, as Jen likes to call us, and some of us are new. So we always do icebreakers. I am for also, just in case you are not aware, I host the CRM Analytics meetups with Jennifer Schreier and Jeff Rothman, who today said he cannot join because he is slammed. He works for Salesforce. Jen works for and I work for Conservice. So, and Jeff and I are from Chicago, or we live in Chicago. Let's put it that way. And Jen is currently in Arkansas.
Because I can afford to live here from California.
Yes. So we are in multiple time zones and multiple places. So sometimes we do hybrid. Sometimes we do only online, like Santiago is in, I think, California, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's only online. We didn't do hybrid today. And now for the icebreaker. What is your most memorable trip? Let's start with Santiago. And if you can start typing in, we'll see where we
Certainly. I think my most memorable trip would probably be my trip to Kauai a couple of years ago. It happened to be the place where I married my wife.
Nice.
And it also happened to be the first place I went to where I truly felt what it was like to disconnect from everything. And it was a level of peace that I don't think I've ever found anywhere else that I've traveled. I'm used to the busy life.
Portal me there. Portal me there.
There we go. That's the dream right there. So it was one of the very few times where you really felt what it was like to disconnect and be a person, I guess. I'm used to the city life, busting around all day long. So it was a great experience, and one that I dream about every year. The goal is to go back.
That's lovely. We can all put ours in the chat too.
Yep, please do put on your chats. Jen, what about you?
I have to say, 15-ish years ago, I decided to go to India and do some missionary work, but not like affiliated with a church. I went and worked in Bangalore, the Kolar gold fields for 3 months, and got to live just out on the land and help people. And so after 3 months of doing that, you come home and really thankful for everything that you have here. Just simple things, right? Medicine, a bathroom, no more backpack with toilet paper in it with me all the time, So for me, it was going and living in I don't want to say third world country, but it was third world country-ish, and coming home and realizing that I have everything at my fingertips, and I'm just, there's no reason not to be negative ever, right? Even when you're having the worst day at work and everyone's driving you up a wall and people are in data kindergarten, you just know that you got a bed to sleep in, a roof over your head, and food to eat, and a lot of people don't have that. So there you go. That's fine.
That's nice. Very nice. Okay, everyone can type in. For me, it was Yellowstone. I took my parents there. It was from flying to Salt Lake City, then driving using the scenic drive. So you can go from Salt Lake City to Yellowstone in 4 hours, or you can go in 8 hours. So we chose the 8-hour route to Yellowstone, which was so gorgeous.
Oh, Yellowstone, beautiful.
Yeah, it was so gorgeous. Okay, so next slide, please, before Santiago introduces himself and gives us a demo. Shubhadeep says Poland and Belgium because it is too clean.
Yeah, and also because that's the only place I've gone to.
Okay, we love these answers. Yes, definitely. Okay, so announcement. We are moving away from meetup.com. There is a very big reason behind that. Meetup.com is charging us double that it used to. So for 3 months, instead of paying about $80, now it is $183, which is insane. So we went to Salesforce, we went to Tableau, and we told them we need a user group and we cannot be doing this without a complete, without support from you guys. So they said submit a request, and we did. So we are now part of the Tableau user group event platform. I have been told today that it takes a few weeks to officially onboard because it's Bevy and they have to do something. Once it does happen, we will be posting it on LinkedIn and meetup.com. But going forward, you will need to create a user group, your user on usergroups.tableau.com. And from there, if you go to chapters, you will find us. But once that is announced officially on the group, we are going to post about it. So happy to move away from meetup.com and go to Tableau. So that was our announcement. And now back to Santiago for his introduction and then the demo we have all been waiting for.
Awesome. Well, hey, everybody. It's great to see a lot of familiar faces on the call today. For those of you who I haven't met, my name is Santiago Lopez. I am a solution engineer here at Salesforce, covering CRM analytics aligned with the automotive space. So today I wanted to take some time to kind of walk through how CRMA and Agentforce come together. You know, if anybody's been watching anything that's been in the public eye on the Salesforce end lately, it's been everything Agentforce, Agentforce, and Agentforce. So, you know, a couple of weeks ago, we started really thinking about how can we start to bridge the gap between leveraging native analytics in Salesforce like CRMA and being able to infuse that with generative AI. So Agentforce, right? And if any of you saw the little demo vignette that was posted online on LinkedIn, you know, we kind of showcased some of that. Now, today I wanted to showcase a little bit more on how we've expanded on some of these use cases of bringing those two technologies together, but also, you know, showing a little bit of behind the scenes on the how. How did we actually go about doing something like this? You know, the architectural approach to be able to start delivering on use cases similar to what we saw. So without further ado here, let me go ahead and share my screen and we can go ahead and jump right into a demo org of mine. And can everybody see my screen okay?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So this demo org may look a little bit familiar to what you guys may have seen online. Now, one thing I do want to mention is, you know, there's a couple of ways that we can interact with Agentforce from a CRMA perspective. And, you know, when we start to think about interaction between the two technologies, we have to start thinking about data itself, right? Where does the data live and how can we get data to be accessible for generative AI? Now, there's a couple of ways to do this. So the approach that we took in our demo was being able to leverage CRMA and then take advantage of its core write-back capabilities. So to write back fields back into Salesforce to respective objects like the account object, the contact object, lead object, any object that you'd like really, or even to take one step further, even to a custom object. So, you know, initially we started to think about, you know, CRMA could really serve as a way to provide an intelligent layer as part of the Gen AI experience, because Gen AI in its own capacity isn't necessarily great at complex math, but we could leverage CRMA to handle the complex math and write back those results where Agentforce could then theoretically pick them up and then prioritize or list those out for end users to see based on whatever use cases might be available. Now, one of those use cases that, you know, we may want to take a look at might be something along the lines of, hey, I'm looking at this dashboard, this dealer sales performance dashboard, and I'm assessing my revenue sales trend. Now, naturally, I could be inquisitive and try to drill into my insights and kind of figure out, you know, where do we see growth, where did we drop, over the previous months in the current fiscal year. We could also think about leveraging generative AI through this capacity as well. So we could ask Einstein and we could give it a prompt to start with, just as an example. So something along the lines of, summarize vehicle sales for 2024 and provide an itemized review of sales and month-over-month growth rate. Right now, what's actually happening here is we're leveraging the Einstein API on the back end for Agentforce, and we're passing over this query on the left-hand side into that LLM. So in return, we're able to take the data points that are being captured in a respective query on a CRMA dashboard and be able to do a variety of things. You can have it do simple things like calculating that month-over-month growth rate, right? So it can do some simple math. It can do things like taking, let's say, customer feedback, right, from a service perspective, and being able to summarize, themes, recurring themes in that feedback, or being able to identify customer sentiment, right? Things like that. So here's a way that we can start leveraging, generative AI to augment that analytical experience. So not only are you just, infusing a dashboard, right, back into Salesforce for an end user to see and prioritize and action that data, but now naturally they can begin to be inquisitive of that data and start asking it additional things to help supplement that journey, right? So what's nice about this is, at Salesforce, at the heart of everything that we try to do, we try to instill trust, right? And, naturally, the question has always come up with our customers. Right? How do we trust the data that's being returned here? How do we ground that data? So what's great about this mechanism that we're doing here is by accessing the Einstein Generative AI API, we're grounding our response only in the data that's being captured in this query on the left-hand side, right? So we're not giving Einstein access to any additional data, no other additional customer data. We're simply providing it high-level sales trend information that's being captured in this chart right here. Now, naturally, you could supplement that with additional data points if you'd like, because within CRMA, we could have a query that shows me a nice chart, but it might also contain additional characteristics like, customer details or whatever that might be. So all of those could be data points that you could then effectively feed the generative AI model here to respond to whatever questions an end user may have. So this is one of the ways that we have the ability to access generative AI and infuse it as part of that experience. Now, let me take a moment to pause here. Are there questions on just this capability here? In a little bit, I'll look at the dashboard designer UI and we'll take a look at how we actually did this. But I just wanted to showcase this because this is something that's relatively new for us that we haven't shown a whole lot of. So this is something that's actually accomplished, with technically with an open source package that we developed here at Salesforce by tapping into that API. This is something that pretty much any developer could do with technical chops, or they could leverage some of the work that our Salesforce colleagues have already started working on. But I think this capability is really cool and dynamic, and being able to infuse and leverage generative AI in pretty much any CRMA capacity.
Very nice. This was a very good introduction. Real quick, Santiago. The map on the left, which is a trend chart, did you use time series or anything for the trend, or?
We did, yes. We did use a time series to help give us some of the forward-looking predictions. So, one of the other things that I had started thinking about here from this perspective is, time series is great to be able to forecast future state. One thing that we're also starting to think about as well is think about predictive AI components that you might also be leveraging today to manage your business. Generative AI can also consume predictive AI models to be able to help supplement some of this analysis that's happening on the fly. Now, while we don't have a lot of that to showcase here, naturally, from an architectural perspective at Salesforce, we're starting to think about how do we bridge that gap? Because a lot of our customers, they understand that AI is everywhere. They don't necessarily understand the differences in AI and different AI technologies, predictive AI versus generative AI, and the different things that they can actually solve for, right? But I think the one reoccurring theme that is very transparent is generative AI is able to help us bridge that gap holistically across the board by pulling from all of those AI sources that we may use on a day-to-day basis to manage our business or to help, infuse into some of these insights that are helping us manage those day-to-day activities.
Very nice, Krishna.
Hi, sorry. So are there any trailheads or anything that guide us to connect all these APIs and all, which that's something I'm really struggling to get a handle on?
Certainly. I can certainly take a look. What I will say is there is a GitHub repository that we can also share with you guys. So if you guys have like a dev org or a sandbox that you'd like to try, there is a prepackaged GitHub repository here that'll help you do that automatically. So it'll allow you to install a package that will allow you to essentially infuse an LWC onto a CRMA dashboard and be able to call on a generative AI LLM. So it'll handle that integration piece for you automatically. But we'll certainly take a look and see if there's additional resources. I'll reach out to the individual who created this on the Salesforce side and see if there's anything that we can share that might help for those of you who maybe want to try this.
That's a really good question, because a lot of us are blowing our APIs up left and right, like our bulk API and our REST API. So knowing which API to use and what's most efficient is key. Someplace, if you want more information, if you're just trying to learn about which API to use for what, there's a lot of documentation on Scale Center. And you can even just type into, I mean, honestly, this is what I do when I have to teach people, is I just go to Google and say, Salesforce, what API do I use for what, right? And it'll just the list up for me. I hope that helps.
Kudos to whoever came up with the name CRMA. Can we have our product named this, please?
Yeah, I know, absolutely. I wish, but yes, we were in this instance, we were accessing the Einstein Model API. But yeah, I think, for all intents and purposes, a bit of a disclaimer, personally, I do not have in-depth developer experience. So dealing with APIs is not my something that I'm well versed in, but that package alone was enough to allow me to interact and connect to the Einstein Model API to be able to start taking advantage and developing like this exact experience that we were just looking at, right? So it may be a great starting point, but I do believe we have some documentation on the Einstein Model API. So I will definitely, let me reach out and I will get those resources available and we'll share those out with the team for sure.
Thank you.
Awesome. Now, are there any other questions? If not, we'll kind of keep the pace going here.
Yep, please do.
So the next part of the demo that you guys likely have seen was tackling a Whitespace analysis use case, right? Now, traditionally, from a analytics perspective, we would look at, insights on a dashboard and be able to kind of determine, hey, if I'm a sales rep and I'm looking for opportunities, let me try to identify which customers are we not selling certain products, in, right? In this instance, we're looking at vehicles sold by respective dealerships. So it gives me a nice holistic view of where those sales are doing well and where they're maybe not doing so well, right? In other words, the white space that's on the dashboard. Now, naturally, this is where we can also leverage Agentforce here. Oh, and my prompt was still saved from earlier, so we'll walk through this. But this is where we can start to leverage Agentforce to be able to help us augment that analysis experience, right? Now, the way that we did this is under the hood, I used CRMA, I created a recipe, and I inserted a couple of filters and logic to determine of my transactional sales data that I have for a respective order, where is my opportunity, right? Show me all of the dealerships where we're not selling vehicles, and then compare that in relation to the average vehicles sold based off of a dealer or account's respective area that it corresponded with. So as an example, let's take a look at like this polarity vehicle. So in this case, Electra Motors of Abilene sold 267 vehicles for this polarity vehicle model. Maybe the average for this particular area being the Southwest area, maybe it was 300, right? So in that instance, that would give me a delta of about 33 vehicles. So in doing that simple math, it allowed me to quantify what was my missed opportunity here. Had this dealership sold at the average for its respective area or geography, here's what we could have sold in vehicle sales, which in turn could have been quantified into tangible dollars. So that's what I was able to leverage to help me quantify the value of Whitespace opportunity. And in turn, I ended up writing that back into a custom object that I called Whitespace here. And we'll open that record up in a second, and I'll show you some of the details behind that. But all of this was driven with CRMA using a recipe to infuse that intelligence to determine what that criteria was, and then write those results back into Salesforce in a custom object. Now, in this example, we asked Agentforce, hey, show me my accounts with related Whitespace and the top 3 underperforming dealers in the Pulse vehicle for the West area, ordered by quantity. Now, as a result of that, it took a look at the Whitespace object here, the custom object, and it took a look at all of the dealers in the West area respectively, and then it categorized those based upon that vehicle, based on the quantity that was missed, that delta, right? So it gave me the top 3 dealerships where we sold or had the largest delta or the biggest Whitespace opportunity, right? So in this example here, we're able to then tie it back to that Whitespace record. So if I were to open this record, I can show you some of the details that we captured as part of this. So Agentforce was essentially taking a look at the account, and from the account object, it then tiered off and looked at the Whitespace custom object that was associated to it. And the way we made that association was with a lookup field that tied back this Whitespace record to a respective account record in Salesforce, right? Now, some of the attributes that we wanted to capture were things like area, district, vehicle model, dealer name, right? So all of these fields that we captured here were fields that Agentforce was able to then pick up, read, and then do something with, right? And we actually leveraged out-of-the-box Agentforce actions. Now, one of those actions is an action that allows you to query Salesforce data, whether it's in a standard or custom object, natively. So it basically will take whatever text that you create for your question, like we had up here, and then turn it into a query that the platform understands to return those respective results. So this was a great mechanism to be able to allow us to deliver on that use case to identify Whitespace analysis by simply capturing and writing back certain data points that would help us do that. Any questions on this part before we kind of take a look under the hood here, so to speak? All right, let's dive in. So first off, we'll go into Analytics Studio and just to kind of show and walk through some of the things that we saw today and that led up to what we envisioned and demoed here. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at the dealer sales performance dashboard. Now, first off, we'll start with the first demo component that we saw was being able to take a query and infuse that query into an LLM, right, and return back that response. That was the revenue sales trend chart that we were looking at. We were then able to ask Einstein. What I did here is, I had my dashboard, my home dashboard, where we had the chart surfaced, and I simply created a link using an interaction that allowed us to take a look at a separate page on the same dashboard, which is right over here, the hidden tab here, that essentially allowed me to drag and drop a component onto the canvas here, where I leveraged the Ask Stein component, which was the CRMA Stein package that we were just looking at earlier, that allowed me to effectively call on an LLM. Now, when we look at the component attributes, here's where we see the default prompt that I entered myself, right? And this is what we see visibly in this white box. But down here is where we can reference the LLM model that's being referenced. Now, out of the box, when you spin up this package, it defaults to the OpenAI GPT-4 32K model. You can absolutely change this default model by simply updating the API reference here. But this is just what was listed as default. Now, in turn, once we have the component listed here, let me see if this will let me adjust the parameter here. Let's see, we'll hit Ask Stein. Oops. Let's see. Let me take a step back. Once we had dragged and dropped the component onto here, we simply dragged and dropped the query itself that we wanted to reference on the right-hand side onto the component, and that's what actually tied the two back together. So we don't actually see that here in the UI, but as part of the actual development of this, that's all we had to do to essentially say that we wanted to take this particular query, right, with this ID, and infuse it into this component on the right-hand side. So naturally, you won't necessarily have this Ask Einstein component be responsible for every query on your dashboard. We were very selective because it's tied one-to-one, right? One query to one Ask Einstein component. So that's the current limitation that we have today. But obviously, we have the capability of being able to infuse that generative intelligence pretty seamlessly on the fly here as part of that experience.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you repeat that part once, please? So after the ask, so Askstein is a Lightning Web component which we use as a component in the dashboard. Up till that's fine, and then what query do we just drag and drop in it? I didn't understand that part.
Correct. So when we take a query and we drag and drop it onto the Ask Einstein component, we'll see that it maps to the query on this component. So right, so when I'm highlighted on Ask Einstein, I can see my component here with some attributes,
okay.
but you'll see how it's tied directly to a single query. And this query
is the same component as the chart.
Exactly. They're tied together. It's a one-to-one mapping. Yep. So all the data that's captured here in this query is being fed into that other query. So if we look at like the sample view, just to think about this contextually, the only data points I was capturing was the transaction date, year, month, and then the vehicle sales respectively. I could have had 10 or 12 columns with other data points that maybe weren't visible on the chart, but I could have passed that into the Ask Einstein component to be able to leverage those additional data points to answer whatever questions we might have. So that's why, in this example, I took a simple use case and I said, hey, I already have my data. Just tell me what's the difference between each respective month, right? Calculate that month-over-month growth rate. And it was able to do that, right? But all your data is grounded in that single query. So the only data that LLM had was the data that we captured in the query. So no more, no less. So we weren't passing any customer information over. It was simply high-level sales, vehicle sales information that the LLM was working with.
Yeah.
So
that's very new.
And I will call this as, one of the key differences here that personally we like from an analytics perspective is the elephant in the room with being able to leverage generative AI with analytics is the fact that there's a huge consumption cost that usually gets associated with that. Imagine having to query, millions of rows of data to surface answers like this. That could be problematic potentially, but with approaches like this, we're really minimizing the amount of data that gets returned. We're only returning, a handful of rows instead of millions of rows to be able to answer the very same use case of show me that month-over-month growth rate, for the respective year, right? So it was a great way to minimize the data row consumption, but deliver on that use case all the same.
Okay. And it feeds the predictive data also, right?
Correct. Absolutely.
Okay.
Now that's what we did to deliver on that first use case with generative AI. Oh, Pedro, do you have a question?
Hey, yeah, Santiago. So yeah, all of this great. Yeah. Awesome to see this implemented. So I do have a few questions regarding the last few items you mentioned there. Mm-hmm. So the first things, and I haven't checked the GitHub repo yet, so I will have to see how everything is implemented. But as you mentioned in your intro, the part about trust and security, right? Like I would love to see how that is handled. That security, right? Like, yeah, when you are even when you are sending aggregated data, right? How that security is handled. The second part of the question will be, is the LLMs are the ones available just on the Salesforce platform, right? You are not sending anything outside. Let's say it's not open to send it to other places, let's say. And well, I'll let you answer those two first.
Sure. Yeah. So let me start with that. So with Salesforce, because the LLMs that we're leveraging is all part of the Agentforce platform, we're following the Agentforce platform's, trust and security protocols that are set in place. So one of those being, we have a zero retention data policy. So anytime that a query is fired off and we ask the LLM to answer this, this question that we have here, as soon as we've seen that and we move on, the LLM automatically deletes that response. So we're not saving any of the data that's being captured there. Now, in terms of what LLMs are accessible, the Agentforce platform has, a variety of LLMs that are available natively, right? Like OpenAI is one of the many popular ones, but it also support bring your own LLMs as well. So we support a lot more than just OpenAI. We support, Gemini. We have a handful of them that we support out of the box natively. But for other LLMs that you'd like to bring into the platform, Agentforce is a great platform to be able to operationalize those LLMs. Leveraging Agentforce's trusted platform, to infuse some of these security controls that are in place to handle making sure that we're not sharing data, the wrong way, that we're making sure that we're not retaining any of the data points that are captured here. So a lot of that is baked into the Agentforce platform. We're simply piggybacking off of that from a CRMA perspective here.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great to hear, just to confirm that. And okay, the last question will be, are there any plans to expand these capabilities, right? Like, yeah, right now you have your GitHub repo, you create your component, all of that.
You're going to see a lot more of that,
Right.
And where we're starting to see some, from a Salesforce perspective, where we're starting to see a bit of a shift in terms of where we're being able to develop even more agentic analytic AI experiences is with Tableau Einstein. And you guys have probably seen some of those announcements that have been made publicly. But what we're seeing here is, what we delivered here with today's use cases is being able to ask an LLM some questions and have it help us augment our analytic journey. Right now, what comes next is being able to actually ask an LLM to generate charts and graphs for you. Right. Imagine if you didn't necessarily need to have a dashboard for everything. You could just ask an LLM, hey, show me, my historical sales last quarter by week, for XYZ accounts. And it could do that for you, right? So that's kind of the future case of where this technology is heading, is leaning more on a reliance of traditional BI dashboards and more so being able to have a natural conversation, right, with an agent and being able to infuse those analytics in every part of the process, whether you're simply looking at an opportunity in Salesforce, or if you're looking at, marketing campaigns, right? So that next wave has started. We've definitely started developing on that product roadmap. But for now, we started to see what's possible today, right? Just being able to harness the power of LLMs with data that we already have, with solutions that are already in place, like CRMA, and being able to start delivering on some of these use cases now, as opposed to waiting till when this technology is perfected, right? Because as with any new technology, there's going to be hiccups, at first, and we'll work through those. But, we're definitely a bit of ways away until that visionary future is actually here, right?
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, so if there are no other questions, we can actually move on to taking a sneak peek at the recipe that we use to kind of deliver the second demo vignette experience of how we actually infused some of those insights into an Agentforce agent. Now to do that, we're going to go ahead and pivot to the data manager here, and we're going to look over at recipes. And I believe we have this Whitespace analysis recipe that we use as part of this. And here we go. So what we did here is we started off with an existing data set that I had called Electra Sales. This contained transactional vehicle sales for the past 4 years that we had curated here. Now, the first order of business was to apply a couple of filters, right? So I wanted to make sure that I was filtering by any transactions that happened in the current respective year, because that's all the data that I wanted to capture and represent. I wanted the agent to be able to pull transactional information for the current year. I could have expanded that if I wanted to, but you don't necessarily have to, right? It was just the stance that I wanted to take. Next, I then did an aggregate function to be able to aggregate that data based upon some key attributes like the respective area, vehicle model, and then the average vehicle sold across the board, right? So what's nice about this is the fact that we kind of, we were able to then take a look and see the output of these steps all along the way. And down here, you'll notice we did a very similar exercise, right? We called on that data set. We applied the same filter, but with this aggregate, let's take a look here. We brought in some additional attributes. Now, the reason we did this is this gave us the dealer or account specific information that gave us the vehicles sold by model, right, for the respective year. The top part here was giving us that aggregate view by area. So earlier I mentioned that in order for me to quantify what was my white space opportunity here, I took the actual vehicle sold at a dealership level and I subtracted that from the area average, right, by vehicle model. So that's how we were able to then take those two data points here and join those together. That way it gave us a nice clean table that said, hey, here's all of your accounts, here's the vehicle models that they sold, and here's the area average that was sold as a result, right? So from there, we just did a couple of transforms. So let's see if we can expand this here. Let's see, that was just relabeling some API names here, so it was easier to read. But then from here, this is where we actually did the calculate the function here. So we took the vehicle area average that were sold and we subtracted that from the amount of vehicles that a dealership sold, right? So we took that high level, subtracted it from the lower grain level, and that's what gave us our delta effectively. Now, might look a little funny here because we're calling on the API values here in this formula, but we essentially took this column here on the right and subtracted it from this one on the left. And that's what effectively gave us our output, right? Our quantity output on the far right corner down here. Let's see. And then once we did that, next what I needed to do is I needed to determine, okay, based on that new delta, that quantity field that we just captured, are we overperforming or are we underperforming or are we simply neutral? That meaning, was my quantity return positive? Was it 0 or was it negative? So I infused a case statement as part of this to be able to help me determine that, right? So I was able to then, I created this case statement that helped me tag and determine if I should return underperforming, neutral, or overperforming. So on the right-hand side, you'll see anything where the quantity was positive, meaning that a dealership sold more than the area average, they were overperforming. We don't need to look at those, right? Anytime that it was under, meaning that a dealership sold less than the area average, we were able to return underperforming. So this was created as a way for Agentforce or the agent to be able to pick up that natural language and say, hey, if I'm asking where are we overperforming or underperforming in the West area, it gave it context, right? Because I captured that as a data point as part of this recipe here. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes a lot of sense.
Okay, perfect.
Santiago, real quick. So for those I'm hoping that everyone here knows what a recipe is.
Sure.
And has access to creating recipes. The other thing I would like to mention is if you don't have access to recipes with Spring 25, that is the latest release that happened over the weekend, you can ask your admin to give you, whoever is your system admin, to give you access to view the recipes. So you may not have edit access to them, but you can still view the data and figure out how it works through. So you are no longer limited to always asking us admins how this whole thing came together. You can actually go and see it yourself. So that might help a lot of you guys or your other users who want to know how the data model ultimately works.
Perfect. Awesome. And then lastly, there was just a couple of last few steps that we needed to do here. So naturally, I have this massive table that has, all of our vehicle sales by dealership, giving us all of this great information, but that's not what I need for white space opportunity, right? I only need to look at those where dealers were underperforming. And this is where we leverage some filters, right? So anytime that the quantity was less than 0, I filtered those records out. That way my data set was truncated even smaller to only those records where we were performing. So this gave me a much cleaner data set that only represented where we truly had white space opportunity, right? And then I think lastly, just for Agentforce's ability to more effectively prioritize records, I inserted a couple of formulas just to, essentially get rid of the negative quantity values and turn them into positives, right? Because I wanted it to be able to stack rank from greatest to least. And the only reason I did that is because I realized based on how you would naturally talk and say, hey, show me my largest opportunities, it doesn't think the largest negative quantity being your largest white space opportunity, right? So we had to do a little massaging to make sure that the agent was able to then read this list and know how to prioritize that list effectively based off of natural language text there. So that was the only thing we needed to do for the last step. And then lastly was we did an output function. So in this instance, I outputted this into a data set that I extracted as a CSV to upload into my custom object for the demo. But in practicality, what we'd be doing here is we'd actually be creating an output and writing those records or those results back directly into the core platform, right? So we'd leverage an output connection, and I'd have to set one up. But this is where we'd actually write the results of this data, of this table right here, back into the Whitespace custom object. Now, if we think about cadence and refresh, maybe this is something that's done at a quarterly level, right? And maybe this isn't, you don't want necessarily Whitespace opportunity to be updated daily, because as your sales teams action these insights and they start following up with these dealerships, that takes time, right? So this is where, in practice, we wanted to start thinking about maybe this is like a monthly or quarterly exercise where we could say, hey, every quarter we're going to show our sales teams their largest white space opportunities that they can go tackle for the next few months, right? So, this is what I encourage all of you to start thinking about. While we can perform on a lot of these deliverables and these use cases, we want to start thinking about practicality in terms of, what would this look like if an end user were to start seeing these insights? Because we don't want this to be a moving target. We want this to be something that's consistent, that falls naturally into their respective sales cycle that they can action, and not just tell us, oh, they're just giving us all these crap leads or whatever that might be, right? We want to instill confidence and trust in the sales teams that what we're serving up here is truly going to help them drive impact to their business.
Thank you, Santiago. That was a great point. In addition to what Santiago just said, one big reason to filter your data to what you actually want the users to see and not give them everything that's under the hood is most companies at least have security built into this. The more data you have, the longer the recipe takes time to build the security into that, because it's row level security. And from experience, I can say that if your data set is smaller, whatever your security is, it is going to take less time to run the recipe than showing everything which is not needed for the users and still just keeping the data because maybe someone wants to use it. So if you can filter your data, that would be great, because your recipes will start running faster, especially if you have security inbuilt after that.
Absolutely. Awesome. And then I guess one last thing that I can show, what did this look like on the Agentforce side? Right. So, and this is where I'll pivot, since we have some time left still. So from here, when we wanted to set this up on the Agentforce side, there was a couple of trains of thought here, and I'll speak to some of the learnings that I've encountered as part of this whole process, because Agentforce was not only new for the world, but it was very new for us solution engineers here at Salesforce. So when we announced it, at Dreamforce, we were all scrambling, trying to figure out, okay, how do we learn what this truly means for us, and how can we actually take advantage of the capabilities that it allows us to tackle. Now, naturally here, if I go into setup, I could access Agentforce by, typing in agent. And if I look at our little agents tab under the Einstein header, this is where I can actually see Agentforce, right? We have it turned on. I can see agents that are actually active that we've created, and I can actually view these respectively. So Einstein Copilot, this is the name of the agent that is responsible for everything internally into your Salesforce instance. So here I went and I opened it in Builder, and I was poking around trying to figure out, there's a lot of different things that you can adjust within Agentforce. We categorize things based off of topics and actions. Now, topics allows us to say, hey, general CRM inquiries, we're going to have a variety of actions that fall under this topic, right? So like if we click here, we can see a lot of the information that's being passed as part of, for the LLM itself. So there's a variety of classifications for this LLM. There's a variety of instructions that we're feeding this out of the box, right? Now, my goal was, how do I take advantage of this without customizing a whole lot of this? I wanted to try to see what was truly possible with out of the box. And naturally, I started looking at what are the actions that are available to me right now. And the one that I ended up diving into was the query records beta action. Now, this in particular allows you to query any data point in Salesforce as long as that data is captured in a standard or custom object. It's the same action that's leveraged anytime you ask something simple like finding all open opportunities created in the last 5 days, right? It's using that very same action in this example. So here you get some additional insight that what it essentially does is it'll try to take, your plain natural language, and it essentially generates a query that Salesforce understands in order to retrieve those results from an object. So this is what we manipulated to help us deliver on those use cases without needing to create anything additional. I didn't have to customize the agent at all. I didn't have to create a prompt template at all. Now, what I did learn is sometimes this LLM will answer my question the same way, but slightly differently, right? It might give me a different format, but it gives me the same information. Now, this is where I realized that I had room for opportunity to maybe leverage what we call a prompt template here in Agentforce. A prompt template allows us to give more definitive guidelines and instructions on how the agent should respond to these requests, right? So if I were saying, hey, as a salesperson, if I'm asking for Whitespace, let's respond it in XYZ way, categorize things, with bullet points, whatever that format might be. There was an opportunity for me to leverage a prompt template to make sure that no matter who or when a end user asked this question to help with Whitespace, that the output was always identical. And that's what I didn't do. So learn from that, if you will. This whole exercise was a way for us to figure out how we could operationalize CRMA within Agentforce quickly. But then we started to realize we could truly define and make this more rigid to make sure that anytime that these questions were asked, that we always received a consistent output that was formatted seamlessly across the board, no matter who or when it was asked. Awesome. Well, that's about all that I had here. Are there any questions on what we've seen from an Agentforce perspective? I just kind of wanted to, open up Agentforce here, peel it back, and just kind of show we didn't actually create anything custom. We didn't have to create any new actions or topics. We were able to leverage a lot of what was out of the box to deliver on what we saw in the demo today.
Thank you, Santiago. Let's open it up for questions. Yes, the Ask Einstein part was awesome. Just opens up a lot more capability than we would think.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's one of my personal favorite parts.
Okay, questions.
Can you show how you connected the APIs or how you called? Because the recipe details were very helpful, but how do you connect that to the API?
Was the question just for having additional information on the actual connecting to the API itself?
Yes.
Yeah, so let me, that's where we'll get some of the documentation around that. We actually do have it posted, and I know I've seen a link. I just don't have it saved at the moment. But we do have some documentation on how to actually connect to the Einstein model API. So we'll share that after this. I'll have Sayantani share it out with the team. I just need to find that first.
Yeah, so my question is around, I like the Whitespace use case that you shared. Have you seen other use cases out there leveraging this functionality?
Yeah.
And what do you think is best for I would say more of a sales operations group, things like that, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
So one thing that I didn't show as part of this demo that we had actually included as a use case was KPI performance. Imagine if you could actually consolidate all of your KPI notifications using the same methodology. So you could have a sales rep say, hey, show me what, of all my, let's say 50 KPIs that I'm managing my business to, what are the top 3 that I need to be focused on today? And it could then itemize and say, here's where you have the largest room for improvement, holistically. Now it's a great starting point, and we start to think about how do we minimize the amount of time it takes for an individual to do analysis on their data to say, where do I have room for improvement, and start thinking of ways that we can surface that up in a more automated and intelligent approach without getting 1,000 emails, right? That's always the Achilles heel, is like, I don't need an email every time.
We all love emails, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So we've
awesome.
been thinking about using agentic analytics as a way to be able to help us as individuals figure out where to start. I don't need to I don't need to dig into a dashboard to figure out where to then go look. Just tell me what I need to look at right now, and I'll go do it, right? So that's where I think tackling use cases similar to that, like creating maybe a KPI performance use case that it consolidates all of the KPIs that need attention. That's a great use case for sales ops to be able to infuse a sales team to be more proactive. And this is where we can then start thinking about leveraging predictive AI as part of that. Hey, based on your current performance and your current trajectory, we don't think you're going to hit XYZ by the end of the month or quarter, right? So let's get ahead of this now. And these are the type of insights that we could start to deliver from an agentic perspective that I think would be very impactful for pretty much any organization, right? And helping them get ahead of the game without getting bombarded in negative emails, right? Because we see it with every customer, and it's always trying to find that fine balance, right, of not overwhelming your sales teams with negativity and the things that aren't going so well, but making sure that you're empowering them to, with all the right data points to go take action on that data.
Love it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? May not be related to what Santiago explained. Can be CRM analytics as well. Go ahead, Santiago.
I see there's a question in the chat about if it takes into account row-level security set up at the CRMA data set. Yes, and the only reason that this actually happens is because when a dashboard is being viewed, the query that gets returned is already taking into account the row-level security for that respective user. So if I'm an account owner and I'm looking at my revenue trend, it's only showing me my data for me, right, as a sales rep. So when I feed that into Ask Einstein, it's doing all of that math with the LLM based off of data that's already been pre-filtered down to just me as an individual. So it is respecting the account or row-level security that's set up on the CRMA data sets.
Great question, Raj.
Does that apply on the object that you created as well? So the white space object that you created, I mean, assuming if I have some record level security on that object, does that also then respect
It
that
does.
object? Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. So Agentforce will always automatically assume the security rights of the individual who's asking the question. So like personally, if I were to go in and ask, show me, all of my opportunities here at Salesforce, it will only give me my opportunities that I'm involved in. It won't give me opportunities in different areas of our business that I don't have the accessibility to see. So it'll always respect those permissions that are set in place. And that's the huge focus part of the Einstein trust layer that's infused in Agentforce that kind of trickles down into all of these other things that we're seeing like today, where we're trying to leverage, Agentforce capabilities, leveraging Gen AI LLMs, but that trust is what gets instilled throughout the process from start to finish.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else? CRM analytics, Agentforce, any other questions you guys have while we have a principal solutions architect here?
I think everyone has a lot to think about.
That is
kind of blown away. You kind of made me sad. I'm between all the products now, and I'm like, oh, I wish I was working just in CRMA. I could take that and do 10 more things with it, right? So I do appreciate the inspiration in what you presented. And for everybody on this call who's new and, just seeing this for the first time, it takes time, right? And the best way to figure it out and build things with it is, I always say, to break it, right? Install it, push it to its limits, see what it can do and it can't do. But there was a lot of parts and pieces that you showed in the presentation that we could just take one little thing of what you showed, even if we're not even using Agentforce, right? But you're like, oh, you did that there? Okay, I can go put that in my recipe, or I can go. Yeah. The sky's the limit. And if you're in a position where you can make adjustments to the inside of Salesforce, like he made a custom object to hold more supplemental data, that's another great thing you can do too, because you can always take sales statistics or some kind of pre-sum data, put it in a custom object, and then produce, just data on the sales statistics without having to bring all your accounts and opportunities over to do it. So you did show a lot of kind of old school cheats presented in a new way to do the cheat, right? So in the old, we would just formula field up right into a custom object somewhere. But now you can take the data, you can pass it back, you can enrich it. You can put postal codes in there and run it against your regular data, right? And see who's got a bad zip code. There's all kinds of uses here. So don't limit your imaginations to just this use case. Take this as, an ingredient to what you're already building. Well, you got 31 flavors of ideas there. So we appreciate that. Now, for anybody else who is on this call who is just getting started, you said you had a GitHub repository that you could give that information. Is that something in the chat already?
No, I'll send it when I put the LinkedIn post. I'll send everything together.
Perfect.
Okay, so any kind of link to anything, because I know I'm the type of person that I get off this call and then I say I want to do that. Where can I find it? I wasn't listening to that part. So any supplementals that you can give us afterwards that we can post to go with this, and then when we reconvene next time, we can actually say, in the last 30 days, I did X from that idea. So we'll definitely follow up with you and see what we all can create from your inspiration.
Awesome.
Also, we usually hold the CRM Analytics Q&A sessions, which we did not do in January because of all the holidays coming in. So we will do, Jen, 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think we need one. When is TDX? We probably all need to get.
Oh, that would be TDX. Yes, TDX is right that week.
Let's do it the next week so we can discuss the announcements, because there will be announcements, as there always is, right? And then we can all vent.
Yep. So let's do mid-March will be the next Q&A session for those of you who want to attend.
Yeah, and that one is not recorded, so you're allowed to come in, give your scenarios, even if they're interpersonal in the data world, and it stays under lock and key in that hour that we talk about it. So it's a safe place for data people to come be with your own, whether it's, something small or something big. If we don't know how to fix it, we'll find somebody who can. So we welcome you all to come when we do that post TDX.
Post TDX, yes.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, shout out to Santiago, because I like having a guest. We're used to doing all the talking. I like sitting back and letting someone else talk this time. And we want to invite you back in in 3 more months, you'll have more goodies.
Yeah. We'll
Yeah.
see.
Because it evolves, right? So
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
you're going to build on top of it too.
Absolutely.
So yes, thank you so much, Santiago, for agreeing to do this. And also for anyone else, it took Santiago less than a minute from me reaching out to him and him telling me, yes, he's going to do this. So that's how proactive some of our CRM analytics team are.
You could have said, just go call a partner.
It's an exciting time to be alive. This is a great, what we're seeing here with the Gen AI stuff has been amazing to see, like all of the use cases that are possible from an analytics perspective. And I think that's truly is the way of the future here, right? So it's great to see. It's great to get customers more excited about, this technology, especially as we start to get more mature in the product space. We're literally just getting started here. So I'm super excited to see what's to come.
Yeah, and my current role is the back end of what you're doing. So I'm looking at how that works on the back end, how the data is going back and forth on the APIs. And that was a great question somebody had, because I'm old. I've been around for 20 years with Salesforce. I built it from the ground up, and we used to have to understand back in the day, architecture 601 was just something you had to learn, like which APIs to use. But then in the last 10 years, everybody's rolled into a mature org. So you've never had to know how things are on the back end. Now we're reaching what I call data endgame Salesforce, where we're filling it up to the brim and there's no more space. So you have to know where your data is going, what you're using, what those limits are. I mean, I got to thinking when I went off camera that for those of you who are wondering about APIs, the very best thing, go search governor limits. All you have to do, because those are the limits of Salesforce. And that will tell you every API that's there and what the limitations are and what you should be using it for. And if it does have problems, you know how to troubleshoot it. So that's probably, and that's pretty easy. Let me put this in here, search governor limits. That's what they call, what I'm saying, like data endgame sales.
Yeah, I'm learning so much from Jen about that. She is an
Oh, hey, man.
expert.
That's one of my colleagues. You just signed on in here. That's
Your other colleague also was here. Evan was here.
Yeah, yeah, she's all over that stuff. So
Don't tell
yeah.
people we're here. Yeah, I'm supposed to be pulling data right now on governor limits, by the way. So yeah, and anybody who has API questions like that, you're on the right track. Just stay tuned. Salesforce is getting a lot of content out for everybody, but it is a learning curve. It's like driving. You know, the first day you press the gas or the brake too hard, and a month later you're in the fast lane. So just give yourself a pat on the back for even starting your journey there. Now, so 2 weeks from now, we'll have our QA, and then
Is directly on TDX. So
that down.
yeah, 3 weeks from now we will post about it. And please remember that we are moving on from Meetup. I think the next one will still be posted on meetup.com, the Q&A, because before I just got an email from Tableau user group team that it won't be live before mid-March. The Tableau user group platform will not be live before mid-March. So so the Q&A session, you will still hear about it from meetup.com, and then we are going to shut down meetup.com and move to the Tableau user group permanently.
I don't think anybody really pays attention to the URL. We just click on it, so we'll probably be fine.
No, but for Tableau user group, like for meetup.com, you have to sign up. For Tableau user group, also you have to sign up.
Oh, so you can't just get the link and
No. You actually have to sign up. And I think it allows you to post the meetup link right there, which has been a problem with meetup.com. They don't allow anything other than Zoom, and we don't use Zoom. We use Google Meet. So I have to post it the day of the meeting.
Okay, awesome. And so are we at time? Like, I don't even know what time it is. I'm snowed in, so I've lost track. It's just blue outside, right? Okay, well, we thank everybody for staying over with us, and we're always available. Ping us on LinkedIn, or we'll see you in 3 weeks. But appreciate your time. You're all of our data brothers and sisters. So stay safe out there.
Thank you, Santiago. Thanks, guys.
Everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.